Hello, it's PFC Church again, and today we're still playing Yu-Gi-Oh, and we're going to talk more about farming decks. Now, there are a lot of ways to get cards to the game. You can play the battle packs, which is the sealed packs here. That's a good way to get cards, but obviously if you don't know how to play Yu-Gi-Oh, you still gotta play in the campaign. You also have the card shop here. That's all completely random though, so if I know there's a specific card I want to get, the best way to do that is to beat the person in the campaign and see what cards he has in his deck. So we're gonna start with the first campaign here. Now I see Joey has a card or a card in his deck that I like, or we have Maximilian here, and I want one of the Toon cards. So by beating him in the campaign, I get a random chance of getting a card. Now there's a couple of ways to do this. First, you can go to the campaign, find that particular, there you go, and that's his deck. Now we know that's his deck because when you're in the deck edit and you're on an empty slot and you're browsing through the decks, do you see how it says unlocked series Yu-Gi-Oh, the match of the millennium? So we got to find that. So that's the match that we got to find, because as you see, there's multiple times where there's Yugi, there's multiple times where there's Kaiba and Joey. So you want to find the particular match because that's his deck. Now we have to face him. If you flip it, I'm not going to get Maximilian cards, so I have to actually make sure I face him. Now if it's Yugi's cards that I want, I have to make sure I face him. So that's how you do that part. Now after I know which match I have to play, we simply start the game. Now what we do is, once we start it, the fastest way possible to farm out cards is to, as soon as we get in, surrender. When you surrender, you're going to automatically get one random card out of this deck. But then you might say, well, Church, why do we build a farming deck at all? Why don't I just do this? There's several reasons. First off, this is boring, time consuming, and I hope you're watching Netflix while you do it, because it will take forever. For a couple of reasons. First, if he gets to go first, you have to wait. Second, the random card that you get, you have the same chance of getting any of the cards out of his deck, including his extra deck, by the way, every time you play it. So it's the same chance. Whereas if you play it out, you're going to get 3 cards. Now, yes, it's still randomized, but with the 3 cards that you get, it ups the chances that you're going to get the particular card that you want. Whereas before, it's the exact same chance. Every time I do this in surrender, I have the same chance of getting the card. Now, if I decide to play it out, I need a farming deck to do that with. And I'm going to show you how to play or get one of those decks together. Now, the deck that I have prepared for everyone here. Now, this one is, all the cards in here can be found in the first campaign. One of the other reasons to do this is, as you go through the campaign, you're gonna find that there's other story decks that they just completely suck. So you're left with a couple options. You can buy a deck, which I do not recommend, or you can build your deck. Now, some people just farm out a particular deck. They would go into the campaign here, and they would just play this person until they get that deck. So they would just keep playing Maximilian over until they get all the cards out of his deck. Now, if you really like the deck and you want to have fun, like, that's perfectly fine. I did that with the Cyber Dragons just because I like the Cyber Dragons. However, that's not the deck I usually play with when I'm trying to farm out, because I want to try to beat that. I want to try to beat Maximilian as fast as I can to get those 3 cards. So I actually go through and I edit a deck to make sure that I can beat him as fast as I can. Also, as I'm going through the campaign, if I come across a deck that I can't beat, I just make sure I edit a deck that can. So even though it will take time on the campaign stories that you need to play against, having a deck that you can constantly go back to that has a really good chance of beating them is really, really important. Now, one really super important thing when deck building for the campaign, for the story mode and for the challenges, this is not a multiplayer deck. You're not facing another person. So that means all these banned cards right here, they're playable. And not only are they playable, you can have as many of the cards in there as you want. So even though this would be restricted, this Regeki would be restricted to 1 in a multiplayer deck, I can have as many in there as I want. So during the objective of making a farming deck, make sure you pay attention to those super powerful cards. Monster Reborn, probably one of the most powerful cards in the game. You want to make sure that your deck has that in there. The next important thing when building a farming deck is you're not worrying about trying to do something special. You're not trying to bring out Exodia. You're not trying to play the Graveskeeper Servant. You're not trying to play Black Wings or Ajamas. Like that's for fun, which is completely fine. But the farming deck is about beating your opponent and beating him as fast as possible. So the way to do that is you need spells and trap cards that destroy your opponent's side of the field. So that is what you're focusing on. If the spell and trap card doesn't either destroy a spell on their field, trap card on their field, or destroy a monster on their field, it's useless. The only exception being draw. Now the Pot of Greeds and the Graceful Charities, super important when you're building your farming deck. You want to have a minimum of 3. See, I have 3 here. Now you can go up to 5, but I wouldn't go any more than 5. As far as spells overall, since we're still talking about that, you want to have anywhere between 18 to 20. Don't go over 20. I say that because the likelihood of you drawing the monsters you need to finish out the game drops significantly after 20. So that would bring me to the monsters. You want to have 22 to 20 monsters in your deck. Now, when you're building a deck, the most important thing is you want to keep it as small as possible, especially the farming deck. You want to make sure you get what you need, you get it out on there, and you beat your opponent. For the monsters that you pick, the first thing you need to look for is the effect. Breaker the Magical Warrior, one of the best cards in the game. He's actually available to play or to farm out once you've beat Yugi enough times that you unlock the challenge, and then you play that challenge until you have 3 of them. You also get 1 off the bat with the story deck. I would have to double check that, but I know he's available through the first campaign. Once you beat the first campaign, you can definitely get that, and he's in a super important card. You want 3 of them because you're also going to be needing that guy in your multiplayer deck when you actually face real people, so it's really important. So what he does is when he comes out to the field, not only is he a 1900 monster because of the spell counter on him, so he's a tough monster, he can destroy a magic and trap card on the field by removing that counter. So because he can destroy a magic and trap card, it's super important for the deck. The next card that I have in here to show you would be cards like Maneater Bug and Snowman. They destroy a monster on the field, so we like that. We want to destroy monsters and we want to destroy magic and trap cards. That's the whole point of the deck. If they have nothing, you have everything, and it makes the game go a lot easier when your opponent can't play whatever cheese he's trying to play. When you're playing the campaign, that happens all the time. The other card would be Jinzo. Super powerful card. It actually should be restricted, but it's not. Your opponent can't play, his trap cards are all negated, so he can't flip them over. If they're on the field, the effect's negated. And then when you're filling out the rest of the deck, the monsters, what you want to do is you want to try to find the most powerful attack monsters that you currently have, and you're going to fill the rest of the deck up with that. So that would include cards like Force Raider, 1900 attack, awesome starting off. The other cards, so the Mechanical Chaser, that's 1850. So you're looking from, you want to try to fill it up from 1900 to 1800 attack monsters. Now, when you're doing this, you want to fill it up first with the highest, and then you're going to the lowest. Now, some cards that you have will be more powerful than the 1900s with effects, and that's perfectly fine. This is a perfect example of a card that you can find in the first campaign. It's a 2000 attack, but you might say, oh, but it's a 5-star, which would mean I would normally have to require a sacrifice to be able to play him. His ability negates that. All you have to do is discard a card. So not only can you get a 2000 monster out there, it's a special summon. So now you're ramping up even faster on your opponent, and you're beating him even faster. So other cards that you can add to your deck when you're first starting out will be cards like Revival Jam. That's actually an okay card. yes, it's not a super powerful attack, but he's hard to get rid of, which is super important to always have more cards on the field than your opponent. That even includes when you're in the campaign. So if you absolutely need to find cards, and you realize that you don't want to fill it up with a whole bunch of 1800 cards, finding cards like Revival Jam that give you more monsters on the field and they're hard to get rid of are super fine. Now, as you're playing, you're going to edit this deck. So cards that you want to be looking for are cards like Dust Tornado. Dust Tornado destroys a magic and trap card on the field. Torrential Tribute destroys all monsters on the field. Swords of Light, it's one of those stall cards. It's good when you're starting off the bat, but eventually you're going to replace all of those because that doesn't destroy any monsters or trap cards or magic cards. So cards like this, while okay to start with, and feel free to put them in your deck that you're building when you have your campaign deck, eventually that card's going to be replaced. Cards that take your opponent's monsters, cards like Snatch Steal and Brain Control. Now you'll find that in the beginning campaign. Also, really good card to start off with when you're farming up your deck at the beginning. Cards like Fisher, destroy one monster on your opponent's side of the field. Super important. You would be surprised how often this card will come in handy. So as you're going through, you want to look for those cards. You want to look for cards that affect your opponent's monsters. While this doesn't get rid of a monster on the field, it can stop a really powerful monster in its tracks. It's called Book of Moon. So you want to look for those cards that affect your opponent's trap card and spell card zone, and cards that affect the monster zone. And if it doesn't do that, it just needs to be a real powerful monster that just does a lot of attack damage. You don't need to buff your monsters. You're not looking to equip them and make them stronger. Remember, the whole point of your campaign deck is to your opponent doesn't get to play anything and you can play everything. Now, like I said, don't worry about the banned and restricted. You can make your deck out of all the cards in there. Everything there's no such thing as, oh, but I won't be able to play this in multiplayer. You make a separate deck for that. You have all of these card slots. Remember that. You can build whatever you want for that. For me, I like putting PvP next to the title, so I know that deck is for playing in competitive. And anything that doesn't have that is not competitive. So this deck right here is an Exodia deck that I have for fun that I play against in the campaign, because sometimes you want to have fun, like I said. So you have your whatever fun deck you want to farm out. The Harpies deck, that's fine. I have a little Reanimator deck that I have for fun right here. Yeah, I play against the campaign sometimes. But the important thing is here, when you're first starting out, it needs to destroy a spell or trap, it needs to destroy a monster, or it needs to be super powerful. Other than that, when you're filling out your deck, you'll have cards that will stall the game, such as Swords of Revealing Light, Revival Jam, things that will stall the game. But eventually that will all be replaced. And what you should end up with is, I only have one more campaign to go, and right now my deck right here looks something like this. Now, all my monsters here actually hurt their spell zone. So all my and monsters, so it's their spell and trap card zone and monsters. Every monster I have in here does something against it. So all of my powerful monsters got removed, but that's okay because every one of these helps me out facing my opponent. I have 3 of the Bottomless Trap Holes. Super good card to get rid of cards in the future campaigns, because your opponents, as you will see in the campaign, eventually start bringing creatures out of the graveyard super fast, and they'll start running over you, and it won't matter how many times you destroy them. So cards like Bottomless Trap Hole or the DD cards, the ones that remove cards from the game, super important, super good when facing the campaign decks. So don't forget, when you're building your decks, eventually you want to end up somewhere like here. Pick up the powerful cards as you're going and make sure that they end up in your deck. Anything in your sideboard is cards that you're thinking about that might work later on, and you want to keep them around so you don't have to go search for them later. And it's just easy to switch it out. Say, I know I want some more, I'm facing a big creature deck. Somehow he was able to defeat this deck in the campaign. So I want some more of creature destruction. All I gotta do is throw in a couple of torrential tributes, take out the heavy storms, and now my deck has more monster destruction. So that's a good way to start out playing Yu-Gi-Oh! So when you're playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And you're just starting out and you want to get that deck together, you're going to take the best cards that you possibly can, by the time you're done with the first campaign, it should end up looking something like this. So a bunch of creature destruction and a bunch of powerful monsters, and a little bit of draw. And then as you go on, it'll look something like that.